Yes, ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the very end of the conference, and it's my privilege to reflect on War and Peace, inspired by what you have said today, and also to thank you all. As you know, Norway is in one of the most untroubled and peaceful parts of the world, and it has been so for generations, with some noticeable exceptions, which means that none of us would expect war tomorrow in this part of the world. That being said, let me make two observations. The first one is that we tend not to see war coming. Nobody saw the deep changes, the wars and the atrocities we have witnessed since the late 80s in Europe, in Africa, and in the wider Middle East. And this rather depressing experience confirms that what we have seen many times before. Let me take just one historical example. In February 1914, the Norwegian Prime Minister said that the sky, in world political terms, is now cloudless, to a greater degree than for many years. That was the 6 months before the war broke out in Europe. And my second observation is, of course, that Russia has returned as a key player and raised the need for establishing what we have called the new normal. The need for a robust collective defense posture has returned, and to prepare for a potential conflict with Russia. That's where we are today. And today's discussion, as I've read it, have told us that it might be hard to reach decisions, yes, and also to bring forces and equipment forward, including the question of interoperability and persistency, as we learned in the last panel. But I think we're also left with the impression that NATO has achieved very much so since 2014, taking into account the diverging interests of the alliance. And from my perspective, the exercise Trident Juncture illustrates what the new normal is all about. The political dimensions of it are important. It conveys a message to Moscow. It tells the Norwegian people that the new normal will lead to more allied presence, and that you should get used to it. And next time will be another Norway, be prepared. And there is also a message to the Norwegian politicians, I would say, that there is no such a thing as a free lunch, that defense cooperation is based on solidarity and burden sharing, as we have seen demonstrated positively, I would say, in Trident Juncture. But it also raises the question if this is enough. As you know, Washington expects NATO members to live up to the investment pledge, 2% as a minimum as of today, in order to take Article 3, to put it that way, more seriously, the obligation of the single members. If we now assume that a number of countries will not reach that target, and that's an assumption, could it actually result in a deep and irreversible rift in the transatlantic cooperation? I think there is every reason to raise that question as of today. Well, this is the political dimension of the exercise, and there are, of course, many important military dimensions to test the command structure, the logistics, the allied forces in a real exercise. And you told us a lot about this today. But of course, while this is an important litmus test in many fields, testing the constants, as has been said, the real war, if it comes, will not unfold in mid-Norway, but most likely in the Baltic region or in the north. And that might be rather devastating and demanding for the alliance. It might take the form of well-prepared cyber operations and hybrid actions in grey areas between peace and war, unwar, non-peace as it was called, that could disrupt Norwegian and NATO decision-making and undermine Western unity. Or Russia might launch a huge array of long-range precision-guided missiles, making it extremely difficult for NATO to move forces to the north and even to reinforce Europe from the United States, these bastion scenario, as we have talked a lot about in this country. The Trident Juncture exercise, in this the NATO response force was of course the backbone of the southern forces. There is every reason to ask if this force, especially the land component of it, will ever reach northern Norway in a real crisis, has been touched upon earlier. And that brings me to two final observations. The first one is that in broader geostrategic terms, the high north is first and foremost a naval and amphibious theatre of operations. In defense of the north relies of US and UK support in particular, at least initially. You know that the US Marine Corps has a strong footprint in Norway, and it played a key role in Trident Juncture. And the larger strategic picture comes, of course, into sight when we link this to the presence of the carrier Truman, to the reactivation of the Second Fleet and the formation of the Joint Force Command in Norfolk, and also to the ambition to build a more robust maritime strategy for the North Atlantic. That is the package. And then my second observation concerns Nordic defense cooperation. Finland and Sweden are about to become functional allies of NATO based on a web of agreements that incrementally prepare them to operate together in a crisis should their governments decide to do so. They had significant forces in Trident Juncture, an Article 5 exercise, and in the new vision for the Nordic Defence Cooperation, the countries underscore that they will strengthen their defence cooperation in peace, crisis, and conflicts. This cooperation has become so far-reaching that one could ask if the countries now should prepare for fully fledged and unconditional cooperation in the event of war. It could be done without Sweden and Finland becoming NATO members, at least in principle. One could argue that this might lead to more tension, but also that it might enhance Western deterrence and defense significantly. Just let me take two examples. The first one is the great benefits it would be if those Nordic countries could coordinate the use of the significant air forces in the Nordic countries. And the second one is that much could be gained if one could move forces and material quickly around in the Nordic region, opening up for sending reinforcements from Norway to Finland and from Sweden to northern Norway. That would be a change of paradigm in the Nordic defense cooperation. And it could be an obvious topic for the next conference, because there will be new conferences, because the SNE program will return next year and the year after. But as of today, now it's for me time to thank you all for your participation, your important contributions. I owe a special vote of thanks to the moderators and of course to the speakers in particular. Let me also add the SNE team who made this event possible. At least I've learned a lot, and I hope you have too. So please join me all in giving the participants a big hand, and thank you all and have a nice trip home.